International borders can be very complicated. I showed this in a previous video of mine, but there are still plenty more complex international borders in the world. Like last time, I'm going to start by looking at enclaves and exclaves. The first complex border is between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The first and most obvious irregularity is that Azerbaijan has a large exclave, although it's not an enclave because it borders more than one country. But then there's also 3 smaller exclaves of Azerbaijan, all of which are enclaves because they're completely surrounded by Armenia. Contrasting this, there's also 1 exclave of Armenia enclaved within Azerbaijan. However, since the 2 countries were at war with each other back in the early 90s, the enclaves effectively no longer exist since they're controlled by the opposite country. But things get more complicated when we talk about the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, a self-declared independent country within Azerbaijan with virtually no international recognition. But how did all this happen? Well, both of these countries were part of the former Soviet Union, and Joseph Stalin really liked messing with international borders, creating enclaves and exclaves, and splitting countries up. Some historians have suggested that this was to implement a tactic known as divide and conquer, to split power up and not let any one country have too much power. The Nagorno-Karabakh Republic is based off of the original Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast, created during the Soviet Union as part of Azerbaijan, despite having a population that was 99% ethnic Armenian. Tensions were kept under control while both countries were part of the Soviet Union, but fighting started between the countries in the late 80s, and by the time the Soviet Union collapsed, they were at all-out war with each other. Upon independence, Azerbaijan removed the autonomous government and split the land between the neighbouring provinces, a decision that was extremely unpopular among the residents, who wanted to either become an independent nation or join Armenia. Today, the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic controls most, but not all of, the land that used to be the Autonomous Oblast. They also control parts of Azerbaijan that were not part of the Oblast. So there's parts of land they claim but don't control, and parts of land they control but didn't originally claim. Yet more proof of Joseph Stalin messing with international borders are the enclaves and exclaves of the 3 bordering countries of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, 3 more former Soviet states. In total there are 2 exclaves of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, 1 exclave of Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, and 4 exclaves of Uzbekistan within Kyrgyzstan. And there's also 1 de facto enclave, the village of Barak, which legally is just a Kyrgyz village within Kyrgyzstan, but the surrounding area has been controlled by Uzbekistan since 1999, and despite only being 1.5 kilometers from the mainland, the 1,000 or so people living there are unable to leave the village due to road blockades. The smallest of these enclaves is only about 0.8 square kilometers, about the size of 100 football pitches. The largest of these exclaves is an exclave of Uzbekistan enclaved by Kyrgyzstan, with a population that is 99% from Tajikistan. Now for even more enclaves, over to Europe. In the first video, I looked at the insanely complex border between the Netherlands and Belgium in the interlocking municipalities of Barle-Nassau and Barle-Hertog, but Belgium has even more enclaves, with one of its other neighbours, Germany. There are 5 exclaves of Germany awkwardly cut off from the mainland by a Belgian train track, the Vennbahn, which is no longer in use. In certain parts, the enclaves are so close they're only separated by as little as 10 metres of Belgian land. The smallest of these exclaves is just 1.6 hectares, containing just 1 house with a large garden. But as well as these exclaves, Germany also has 1 more, enclaved within Switzerland. This small German town of about 1,500 residents falls within the Swiss customs area, and although the legal tender is the euro, the Swiss franc is much more commonly used, a very similar situation to Campione d'Italia of Italy from part 1. So to sum up all the enclaves and exclaves of Europe that I've covered, there are several exclaves of Belgium within the Netherlands, as well as several exclaves of the Netherlands within Belgium, but Belgium also has exclaves of Germany within its borders, and in turn Germany has another exclave within Switzerland, while Switzerland also has a part of Italy within its borders, and Italy has 2 entire countries included within its borders. And believe it or not, there are still more enclaves and exclaves that I've not looked at. But moving on to disputed borders. These are the borders between India, Pakistan and China. There's border disputes between India and China, as well as between India and Pakistan. There's no border disputes between China and Pakistan, who have good international relations. Most of the disputed land is what used to be the princely state of Kashmir and Jammu before the partition of India in 1947. At this time, India was divided into 2 independent countries, India and Pakistan. But much of India was made up of princely states not under direct British control, but had their own governments. The governments had a choice of which country to join, or they could remain independent. The division was mostly a religious split, with Pakistan being predominantly Muslim and India being predominantly Hindu. 2 princely states chose to remain independent after 1947, Kashmir and Jammu, as well as Hyderabad. Not wanting a large country enclave within its borders though, India quickly and forcibly annexed Hyderabad. Kashmir and Jammu was a little more complicated though. The state had a population that was about 3/4 Muslim, but a Hindu Maharaja as its leader. Most of the population wanted to join Pakistan, but the Maharaja wanted to remain independent. The decision was very unpopular with Pakistan, and Pakistani tribesmen attacked Kashmir and Jammu in an attempt to take control of the land. The Maharaja asked India for military assistance, but India were unwilling to help as it was not part of India. The Maharaja quickly and reluctantly accepted ascension to India, and the military moved in to defend the land. A ceasefire was called, but war started up again in 1971 when India helped Bangladesh in their war for independence. After just 13 days of war, another ceasefire was called as East Pakistan became the newly independent country of Bangladesh, and the United Nations established the Line of Control, a line that should not be crossed by either side, creating a de facto international border. The line, however, did not go all the way to the Chinese border, leaving the remaining area undefined. The glacier area is claimed by both India and Pakistan. The Line of Control, though, should not be confused with the Line of Actual Control, a ceasefire and de facto international border between India and China. India and China fought in a brief 1-month war back in 1962 over disagreements about where exactly the border between the two countries was. Decisive victory for China left China in control of all the land in which they claim. So India still claims the former state of Kashmir and Jammu in its entirety. Pakistan controls the area on its side of the Line of Control. Pakistan also claimed the former princely state in its entirety, except for the parts of land which are controlled by China. There was a time when this land was claimed by all three countries, but Pakistan ceded the land to China in order to maintain friendly international relations. Of course, this is still claimed by India. Now, in my last video, I talked about the only unclaimed land on Earth, but it seemed that wasn't entirely true, as there is a little bit more unclaimed land. If we look at the border between Croatia and Serbia, back when the border between the two countries was established, the border was set at the River Danube. However, over the years the meandering river has changed quite considerably since then and is now very different from what it used to be. Croatia claims the border is where it always has been, and the river's movement does not affect the border. Serbia disagrees, saying that when both countries became independent from Yugoslavia, the border should have been redrawn to the current position of the river. Legally, the border is set at the river's original position and is depicted this way on maps. This corresponds with Croatia's claim. However, in terms of actual control, it corresponds with Serbia's claim at the river's current position. This causes an interesting situation where there are several parts of land claimed by both Croatia and Serbia, although controlled by Serbia, but then there's also 4 parts of land technically claimed by neither side, 3 of which are less than 1 square kilometre. The border actually cuts through a street and several houses, but in reality they're just regular Croatian houses, because although technically no one claims the land, it's controlled and administered by Croatia. Sticking with Croatia, to the opposite side of the country, and their border with Slovenia. This bizarre situation where land ownership predates international borders has several houses straddling the border, most of which are in Slovenia. What makes this even stranger is that although Slovenia and Croatia are both members of the European Union, only Slovenia is a member of the Schengen area. Croatia is legally bound to join the Schengen area at some point in the future, but at present the border is actually enforced by the police. But perhaps the most unusual thing about this border is the way it seemingly arbitrarily zigzags through the forest. Of course, there's also less complex examples of border irregularities, like this mildly interesting example of the border between Sweden and Finland. The reason the border is like this is because Finland built a lighthouse on the west side of the island before the border had been properly surveyed. When it was revealed that the lighthouse was actually on the Swedish side of the border. So the border was changed in order to put the finished lighthouse within Finland. But not wanting to simply give away their land, it was swapped for an equally sized part of Finland. And there's still more complex borders left in the world. I've still not talked about all the enclaves and exclaves, there's just too many of them. Well, that's all for the second part of the most complex international borders in the world, and be sure to watch part 1 if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.